Let me start with you in Parliament, Mzameni Mdakane, Chairperson, Portfolio Committee on Sport and Recreation. How do you define it as a government?
Bongani, sport is indispensable and treasured social activities amongst humanity, dating back to the beginning of human civilization. A transformation and development of sport is a necessary step for us to take as South Africans. If you want to create a new country, as we are building a new country, as we want to ensure that all our children, our people, our sport person, wherever they are, they participate fully and develop and promote sport in our country. Then transformation really is about systems, is about structures, is about ourselves as individuals, also transforming ourselves and understanding that transformation is about progress. Transformation is about inclusive, integrated, participatory sporting activities by all South Africans.
Mubarak Mohammed, you are at SASCOC and you work with transformation on almost a daily basis. How do you define it from the point of view of SASCOC?
Well, from a SASCOC perspective, let me first explain this question of transformation. For the first time, after 18 years, in November last year, we had what we called the Sports Indaba, where a transformation charter which was drawn up, which took us approximately a year and a half, was adopted. And when we looked at the question of transformation, it is undoubtedly, we've got to change the mindset of the people from grassroots level to the top. We've got to ensure that we inculcate expertise into the various areas. Geographically, undoubtedly, we accepted the demarcation board's resolution that was presented in Parliament. We are now restructuring every national federation where they must be visible, actively involved in 53 regions throughout South Africa and in all 9 provinces. We've started that particular process. And in that vein, come January, all 77 national federations' membership to SASCOC will have to be renewed. And one of the criteria that we're going to determine whether you get your membership is going to be on the basis that are you in existence in those 53 regions, and if there are any sub-districts in those regions, are you visible? To monitor that particular process, we've also now established the 9 provincial councils in South Africa who will help us to monitor that particular process. And we have done a generic scorecard, but with respect to certain sports, we needed to do some specific scorecards as well, because some of them definitely can't exist in our 53 regions.
Okay.
But on 9 provinces, it's not negotiable.
Sport Indaba taking place for the first time in 18 years, Mr. Mohammed. Why so long?
Yeah, I think that's where Minister Fikile Mbalula must be given credit for his aggressive approach in this particular aspect. And it was his initiative where he said, we need the Indaba, we need a transformation charter. Now there again, the transformation charter is not only a SASCOC initiative. It was a minister's initiative, and Sports and Recreation came to the party, came in with all their inputs, and collectively, SASCOC and the minister, together with the department, came up with a why after 18 years, and I think that's correct. I think we emphasized too much on national interest only and ignored development at grassroots level. And also remember, in SASCOC, you don't only have the major sports, soccer, cricket, and rugby. You've got 77. Some codes, we don't even know who they are, where they come from. And that's what we needed to establish. And that's exactly what we've done now. So now we've got everything streamlined. It's now a question of starting a very aggressive approach towards development and not as a talk shop.
Dr. Ashwin Desai, you always forthright about transformation and lack of it in some areas. You are a professor of sociology at the University of Johannesburg. How do you describe it in sport in particular?
Well, it's very difficult to come up with a single definition of transformation simply because the goalposts keep moving and the circumstances changing. And, but I think one of the things that we need to start thinking about in sport is having a sense of an imagination, having a sense of an innovation. we always go down the same path. As soon as we're in crisis in something, let's develop a charter. Nothing wrong with that. But often when we develop this charter, 11 or 12 years ago, cricket developed a transformation charter. But what they forgot about, you can give somebody a map about how to get to the place, but you don't give them transport, they never get to the place. And so South African sport for the last 20 years is a series of broken transformation charters and a series of broken promises. And, the first thing to do is to have some humility from both sports administrators and even government to say that some of the roads we have traveled have been dead ends. Why do I say this? Because the main incubator of sporting talent in any country are schools. And it's no use saying that you're going to level the playing fields in schools if the schools don't even have playing fields in the first place. And some of the sports are involved in breaking school sport. Let me give you an example of that. One of the policies of Cricket South Africa is that if you're a good cricket player, a top cricket player, but you're in a black school, you are taken out of that school and you have to you get a bursary to go to a former white school, a former private school, a Model C school, which means that a culture of cricket never really develops in these black townships. In fact, the black townships then feeders into these other schools, and you don't blame parents because they're given scholarships and they reach the heights of their profession. But you can see how this is a double-edged sword, this kind of transformation.
But Dr. Desai, what do you mean when you say the goalpost keeps moving, keeps shifting and broken charters? Just talk us through that some more.
Okay, one of the things that when in 1992, 93, when we talked about transformation, the pinnacle of sporting excellence was when you made the national team. And so our whole focus was on the national team and a transformation of the national team, the color composition of the national team. But today, with the globalization of sport, we are finding increasingly that sports persons don't need to play for their national teams. If you play for the IPL, the Indian Premier Cricket League,
yes,
you can earn 13 to 14 million rand a year for 6 or 8 weeks of work, so that you don't need to be beholden to the Proteas anymore. And we find increasingly, for example, soccer players like Benny McCarthy and so on, now Steven Pienaar, one of the first things people do is to de-link themselves from the national team. So you can have a whole transformation charter around national teams, only to find that the people who you wanted to transform have long escaped the national borders.
Okay.
And many cases of these changes in the goalposts. And one of the things that I find with sports administrators,
okay,
they are good administrators, but they're hopeless of feeling the global changes of sport and are caught unawares often.
All right. Mr. Mtakane, as the chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on Sport and Recreation, do you agree with some of the sentiments shared by Mr. Desai here? And how far are we as a country with transformation in sport?
Well, transformation is moving ahead. Of course, it's very slow, precisely because there are a lot of challenges. Firstly, is to accept that we wouldn't transform sport if you have not transformed the structures, even individual leadership that is involved in sport. Because transformation without a broader understanding what it means, sometimes it causes a lot of confusion. But because of the meeting in Izindaba that have been convened for consultative processes, I think general sporting persons and administrators in South Africa, now they understand what are the issues that they need to tackle if we want to become a very competitive nation in terms of sport. And of course, there have been some disappointment. In other areas, I think we are advancing. In other areas, we are very slow. Of course, what we could do as a members of committee is to persuade the leadership in sport to ensure that they speed up the process of change, because now there's a broad understanding and appreciation that without transformation we'll be unable to develop sport in our country.
But I'm looking at 18 years into the new dispensation. We're still talking about infrastructure development. Yes, we know that's a huge challenge just across the society, and government is struggling in some parts really to bring infrastructure. But I'm saying 18 years, and we still have these charters and meetings and summits and so on, and we don't come out with a clear plan that says this is what government is going to do. We're going to enforce this. There's going to be a legislation around the issue of transformation. We demand that each and every sporting code is transformed.
Bongani, is a point that you're raising is important. But of course, 18 years of democracy also is not really a long time. Bearing in mind that many great thinkers will tell you it takes not less than 100 years to build a new nation. Therefore, you are very young democrats. I think we should be patient and try to encourage every South African to understand that transformation is his or in her interest. Because if we don't do that, we're unable to have mass participation in terms of transformation, also broad understanding, and that I think Izindaba will continue. Because we must persuade each other, must persuade one another to deal with the question of development and promotion of sport. Of course, sport has become a very big industry too. That's why it's a globalized sport. But precisely because sport can also play an important role in nation building and social cohesion, I think we must be able to persuade the leadership there in the sporting codes, try to develop. Of course, the facilities are still a bigger problem, particularly in rural areas. But I think now, because the Indaba that was convened by the minister and all sporting federations, it seems now there's a clear picture, there's a clear charter, and also there's commitment, because all along anyway, it's one thing to talk about transformation, but it's one thing to commit yourself to ensure that this transformation becomes a reality.